Thanks for joining, and we're just going to go ahead and get kicked off here. Uh, Good morning, everyone. I'm Rhonda Sims. I'm the Associate Commissioner in the Office of Assessment and Accountability at the Kentucky Department of Education, and it is my pleasure today to be the person to call us to order with our new School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Council. So this is the first meeting with a new set of governor appointees, and just welcome to each of you. We have looked at the information that's been provided, and we're going to meet each other and learn more about each other today with this meeting. But you bring just a variety of perspectives and experiences, and we're excited to have you be an advisor in our work and the work of the department. So today, as we go through the agenda, we'll review that a little bit later this morning and go through several steps that you'll see on the agenda. So it's not normally that I would be kicking off the meeting. We'll elect a chair today who will do that. But it is just a joy to see familiar faces, folks that I had the pleasure of working with over the years, and to meet new friends today. So welcome to the work. We find this committee to be a very important one. You help to communicate ideas and your thinking on issues to the Kentucky Board of Education as well as to the Kentucky Department of Education. So you're entering some very important work in this landscape. So again, my pleasure to welcome you today and to call us to order. The Office of Assessment and Accountability serves as the facilitation group for this governor appointed committee. And so I'm going to ask Jennifer Stafford, who is the director, and Dr. Jennifer Stafford, who is the director in the office in that group, which is the Division of Assessment Support, Division of Assessment and Accountability Support, to also bring greetings this morning and kind of tell you a little bit about how we support your work. And then you're going to meet a very key person in that support with Joy Barr, who's welcomed you to the work already. So Jennifer, are you with us this morning?
Yes, good morning, Rhonda. Can you hear me?
Good morning. I can hear you great.
Okay,
There you are. I see you on camera.
good, wonderful. Thank you. And good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first meeting for you as a member of an important member of the School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Council. I'm Jennifer Stafford. I'm the director in the Division of Assessment and Accountability Support. And at the Department of Education, what we have are a number of offices. So there are several offices at KDE, including Office of Career and Technical Education, Office of Legal Services, Office of Education Technology, School Support, licensure. There's multiple offices within the department, and the office that we work in is the Office of Assessment and Accountability, and we are the primary facilitators of this council. So we really appreciate the fact that you have been appointed to this important membership, and congratulations to each of you. We look forward to working with you on a regular basis over your term as a member of the council. The Office of Assessment and Accountability then within the department is divided into really two sections in the office level. So at the office level, you just met our Associate Commissioner, Rhonda Sims, and Rhonda has staff that report directly to her that includes our policy advisor, Michael Hackworth, and our program advisor, Kevin O'Hare, and Elizabeth Goldie, who is our support and makes everything happen. So that's the office level. And then in that division, in that office, there are two divisions. So the Division of Assessment and Accountability Support, as well as the Division of Assessment Data Analysis. That data side is led by Kevin Hill, and you may know him if you've been around assessment and accountability for a while. He has been in the Department of Education for many years and is a good partner. He has reporting to him is the program manager and office branch manager, John Wickheiser. He also has a staff member, a program manager, Mike Prater. So then the division has multiple consultants that work with multiple data. There are a number of consultants that work with, like, for example, the school report card, the ACT data, the data that comes from our main contractors, also with the kindergarten screener, our access. So Kevin and the data division work on the data and reporting aspect of the assessment and accountability systems. The other side is the division of assessment and accountability support, which I lead. And I have a wonderful staff. Helen Jones is our program manager. Jenny Larkins is also a program manager. And then we have Tammy Bradley, who makes things happen for us at the division level. And then we have consultants, which Joy Barr, you're meeting today. And we have a number of wonderful consultants within our division. Our primary responsibility is training on the assessment systems and that implementation of the different assessments across the assessment and accountability system, as well as training for each of those, as well as the accountability system. So that's a snapshot of what the Office of Assessment and Accountability is. We have the office level and then the two divisions in our wonderful staff that we get to work with every day. We really work well as a team, and we look forward to bringing you into that team aspect, and look forward to working with you again over the terms of your membership. So Rhonda, at that, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Thanks, Jennifer. So we wanted to give you just a little review of the office structure that will be serving you really in your role as SCAAC membership and supporting your work. But the key support person to making SCAAC happen very efficiently every few months is Joy Barr. And so you have met Joy already. She's been our chief communicator with you to welcome you to this work, to get you set up for this meeting, to make sure that you had the details of what you needed to do. And she is just exceptionally good at facilitating SCAAC, whether we're an online facilitation, which we've been doing now for several months, really over a year and a half, and or whether we're in person together. And so Joy, we're going to hand it off to Joy to move us through the next sections of the agenda, because again, some of this opening information we will not do typically at a meeting. We'll all be getting to know each other and working well together, and you will have a chair that will work with Joy to kind of move this work forward today. So we're going to turn it over to Joy in her capable hands and let her walk us through the next few stages here to get us moving forward with this group. But again, so happy you said yes. Thanks for being here today and in these future meetings that we have scheduled. So Joy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Rhonda. And welcome again to our first SCAAC meeting, School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Council. The first thing that we're going to do today will be take the roll. And at this time, which again, we will not do this in the future, but as I call your name, if you would be so kind as to say whether or not you're present. And I will say that all of our members are present today, which is tremendous and wonderful. And I'm so glad to, I feel like this is showing your support for this important advisory group by your participation and willingness to be here this morning. So as I call your name, if you will just again state your name as being present, and maybe just a sentence or two about where you are from and the group in which you are representing. as a part of SCAAC. And then we'll move forward with doing the roll call or doing the chairman election and things of that nature. So our first person is Artavia Acklin.
The double A's always go first. Good morning, everybody. As stated, my name is Artavia Acklin, and I am an elementary principal here in Shelby County. I am pleased and honored to be able to serve in this capacity.
Okay, thank you, Artavia. Heather Aldridge.
Hi, I am Heather Aldridge, and I represent the DAC role, and I am from Russell Independent. We are located in northeastern Kentucky.
Okay, thank you, Heather. And I will interject here. You will notice as everyone is introducing themselves that there will be two of each of you in this group, except for a member at large. And that number, that keeps us with a uneven number. Sometimes this group is referred to as a Noah's Ark group. So each of the groups represented, there will be two members representing each of the groups. And I will say that we have 17 members of the SCAAC council. However, two of those members, those representing higher education, have not been appointed yet. So we will be operating today with a 15-member council. So moving forward, Deborah Atherton.
Good morning. I'm Deborah Atherton. I am present. I am the chairperson of the Bullitt County Board of Education, and I'm also a former DAC.
And Deborah, I think that you are representing the local school board members.
That's right. Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, Houston Barber.
Good morning, everybody. Houston Barber from Frankfort Independent Schools, superintendent, and glad to be here. Excited about working with you guys.
Thank you. Renee Boss.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Renee Boss. I live in Lexington. I teach for the Woodford County School System. I'm a national board certified teacher. I represent teachers on this committee. I'm really happy to be here.
Martha, is it Emmons?
Hi, it's Emmons.
Emmons. Okay,
Martha
thank
Emmons. Yes. I am a business owner. I'm representing employer of the state. We own a bicycle and fitness store, and I've been intricately involved in education at the local level for 40 years.
Thank you. Chuck Fletcher.
Hello, good morning. I'm Chuck Fletcher, and I'm from Frankfort, Kentucky, and I represent the school board.
Thank you. Janabeth Francis.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Janabeth Francis. I'm Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning in Davis County, and I also serve as the District Assessment Coordinator, and I'm here representing District Assessment Coordinators.
Okay, thank you, Janabeth. Leslie Jeffries.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Leslie Jeffries. I am representing the parent group. So I have three children, one in the high school setting in Hart County, Kentucky, and two children at a local elementary school. I'm a registered nurse by background and super excited to be part of this group. My background is in assessments for physician and nurse competency and assessment-driven learning. So honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Kerr.
Hi, I'm Lisa Keir. I am an elementary principal in Lexington. I'm from Lexington, principal at the largest elementary school in Fayette County. So I am happy to be here, and I'm honored and look forward to the year.
Thank you. I apologize for mispronouncing your name there.
Not a problem.
Brenda McGowan. She she was on earlier. We'll catch up with her in just a few moments. Kristen Putnam.
Hi, good morning and happy Tuesday. I'm Christy Putnam. I serve as the Chief of Staff at App Harvest, and I represent employers, but I also have a background. I started my career as a teacher, so I've taught all levels, preschool, elementary, middle, and high, but currently in the private sector. It's grateful to be a part of this group. Thank you.
Thank you. Allison Tammy.
Good morning. My name is Allison Tammy, and I represent the parent group on this committee. And I am from Boyle County, Kentucky. I have three children total, two in the Boyle County School District. They attend Woodlawn Elementary, and I'm so pleased to meet everyone and work with you this year.
Thank you. Jenny Uri.
Hello, good morning. So honored to be here, and thank you all so much. I'm very excited about the work we're going to do. My name is Jenny Uri. I'm coming to you today from rural Owen County. I am a high school teacher. I've got 12 years in the classroom now, both as high school and middle school teaching in social studies, mainly science and arts and humanities. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenny. Henry Webb.
Good morning. Good morning, President. I have the honor of serving as the Superintendent of Kenton County Schools. Happy to serve with this group and look forward to the work.
Thank you. And has Brenda been able to connect?
Sorry, Joy. I live in the Apple world and I'm not functioning well with Microsoft Teams at the moment. I've been on and off about 3 times. I think I'm probably the odd person out. I believe I'm the lay person, that one of a kind, which probably is not the exact way to describe myself. I've run around the block more than once, have served on this committee before, and heard a few names that I have worked with, and I'm glad to hear them again. Thanks.
Thank you, Brenda. And as you can tell, we have a 100% participation today, which is tremendous. At this time, so that I can turn it over to you as an advisory group to do the work, we are in need of electing a chairman for the group, who will go on and carry forward with the meeting today, as well as a vice chairman. So at this time, I will open it up to the floor for any nominations for a board chairman for this particular advisory board. So if we have any nominations at this time, we will entertain those.
Joy, this is Heather Aldridge, and I would like to nominate Jana Beth Francis from Daviess County.
All right.
I'm happy to accept that nomination, Joy.
Jana Beth Francis. Is there anyone that would like to nominate a vice chair at this time so we can do the motion together? Or if not, we can do those separately. It's your pleasure. Any nominations for any other nominations for chairman or any nominations for vice chair?
Well, I'm going to return the favor and nominate Heather Aldridge for vice chair.
I will accept that.
All right. We have a motion for the chairman position for 2021-2022, and that is for Jana Beth Francis to serve as the chairman. We also have a motion on the floor that Heather Aldridge be the vice chairman for the 2021-2022 school year or school term. Any other nominations from the floor? Or do I hear a second to that motion?
Second, Chuck Fletcher.
All right. All those in favor of the motion and second, if you'll just raise your hand, we'll do it that way rather than calling roll. All right, good. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And at this time, I will turn the meeting over to Janabeth Francis to move us forward with our agenda.
Thank you so much, Joy. And just a reminder, if while you're serving on SCAAC, you need any assistance, Joy is your person and she'll be great to work with. So we're going to get started, and you were sent the minutes ahead of time. They included a greeting from the commissioner, some information about Kentucky Departments of Education's equity tool, ACT Online, and assessment and accountability updates. Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
I make a motion.
Okay, and can you say who that was? It's going to be tricky when we're in the virtual environment. You kind of need to say this is, and I make a motion.
This is Renee Boss. I make a motion.
Thank you, Renee. Is there a second to accept the motions?
I second the motions.
Artavia Acklin, I second the minutes as presented.
Thank you. Motion approved and the minutes are approved. And now on the agenda, we have a greeting from Commissioner Glass.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Excellent.
Yes, we can.
It's great to see all of you. Welcome to our new members. It's wonderful to have you on board. I'll just update you on a couple of things. I know that you've got a busy agenda and I have meetings pushing up on me too, so we'll all be very expeditious this morning. We continue to see the plateauing of COVID cases around the state, and that's good news. We hope that it continues to decline past this. Of course, over the past couple of weeks, we've gotten children ages 5 through 11 eligible for vaccination. So I encourage all of you to encourage those vaccinations to the extent that you're able with the influence that you have in your community. You wouldn't be on this committee unless you had significant influence in your community and around the state. So that's really the best and first line of defense that we've got in getting COVID behind us as quickly as we can. Shifting gears, I wanted to update you on the Education Summit that we had last week. We had a wonderful event and had about 700 in attendance and several hundred more watching online. KET recorded the whole event, so you're able to live stream and watch that if you'd like. And they're producing an hour special, sort of a greatest hits version of that you'll be able to watch as well. The content of that was really fantastic. I think it sets the stage for where we're headed as a state going forward. And notably, we released a report called United We Learn that was the result of a year-long listening tour and data gathering effort that we had across the state. That report was put together by a group called the Coalition for Advancing Education that was intentionally made up of people across the state, from education roles to business roles to community roles, political leaders, and we made a special effort to involve and include in that group individuals and groups who historically haven't always been involved in policy making and decision making. So it was an intentionally diverse group. Their report is now available. It features a evaluation of our current state in education and an aspirational state or a future state, and then what the work in between those 2 points can be. As it relates to your work, significant conversation was had around assessments and changing assessments. We had a lot of our speakers and a lot of the conversation at the event around changing the student experience and changing the learning experience for students in ways that create deeper, more meaningful, more authentic, more engaging learning for students. The kind of work in school that is like the kinds of complex and engaging work that our students will do when they leave school. One of the conversations that came up in the course of that was was our assessment system and how the assessment system isn't necessarily aligned with that kind of learning, that it really is measuring content knowledge and in a very structured way through a machine scored test. So I want to acknowledge that we have come a long way when it comes to improving the nature of assessments, both in validity and reliability. I think we're looking at that next step, or what might a deeper learning or authentic assessment look like when it comes to state level measures. I also want to give credit to all of you who have administered these assessments, especially over the past couple of years in the state with COVID and all the disruption that we've had. That's been difficult, I know, and the staff at the Department of Education, who's worked to make sure that these assessments happen in accordance with federal law. But I do think that we're standing at the precipice of a major change and an interest in how assessments might grow, evolve, and be different going forward, how we could use them to inform learning in different ways than we have before, how they can measure different concepts than we have before, and how we might change our accountability system that's connected to that. So I'm excited about all that work. You will be engaged in that. And I think later on, you do get a briefing on the summit and the United We Learn report and on shifting work going forward around assessment. So I don't want to steal anybody's thunder when it comes to all of that. But I will just say again, welcome to the new members. Thank you, thank you, thank you for doing this work and advising and supporting us. And I look forward to listening in when I'm able, and also visiting in with you to see how this work is going. Thanks, everybody, and I'll turn it back over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Commissioner Glass. And as you were talking, I put in the chat the link to the United We Learn report, as well as the link to the videos if you want to watch those or listen to them while you're out walking. And I look forward to seeing the 1 hour greatest hits version. So at this time, we're going to ask that the staff attorney, Felicia, share a little bit about SCAAC charge and our responsibilities. You received a PowerPoint in the meeting material, and you can also find that in the Google folder. So Felicia.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? I'm going to show the PowerPoint on the screen. I know you've already received it, but I'll show that on the screen as well. Let me put it in presentation mode. And let's see here. Let me go back. Okay. Can everyone see that? Okay, thank you.
Yes, we can.
My name is Felicia Newman. I am one of the staff attorneys here at KDE. We represent the Kentucky Department of Education and the Kentucky Board of Education. I'm here to give you a simple overview of the School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Council statute and the related statutes. Okay. Our goal here today is to give you an overview for educational purposes only. Lawyers love disclaimers because I can't be held down to any point. So the statutes are more detailed. Let the statute be your guide if you're unsure of an issue. In fact, I would encourage all the members to print out the statute so they can see it written down. I know we love our computers, but I think sometimes looking and holding it in our hands, writing little notes on it is extremely helpful. This presentation is not meant to replace the wording, meaning, intent of the statute. The statute is the statute. I'm just trying to explain it to you here today so you can get an overview of what your goals and the intent of the council are. So, School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Council statute is KRS 158.6452. In the PowerPoint, the red statute number is linked to the actual statute, so you can print it out and look at it. Now, interestingly enough, the previous administration had abolished this council under an executive order, but our governor issued an executive order this year noting that General Assembly did not codify, which is basically make it a law, for the executive order. So his executive order, it expired, and Governor Beshear made sure that it reverted back to its original structure, okay? And he named all of you as a part of the council under the statute. The statute, I'm going to read this exactly from the slide, because I think it's important that you know what your goals are. The statute, obviously written by the General Assembly, gives you your tasks. This is section 1 of the statute. You are to study, review, and make recommendations concerning Kentucky's system of setting academic standards, assessing learning, identifying academic competencies and deficiencies of individual students, holding schools accountable for learning, and assisting schools to improve their performance. So that is the goal, one of the goals, that is the goal of the statute. For you all to make recommendations and to look at all the different things that go on in our school system and make recommendations. After you've done your study, review, and looked at everything, you are to advise the Kentucky Board of Education and the Legislative Research Commission on issues related to the development and communication of the academic expectations and core content for assessment, the development and implementation of the statewide assessment and accountability program. As Rhonda knows, and I've met with her in a previous meeting, that assessment and accountability program is being developed, and it's going to be a new system. And there's another committee working on that as we speak. You're going to recognition of high-performing schools, impose sanctions, and assistance for schools that need to improve their performance. Now, I've listed related statutes that come with this overreaching statute. Every statute probably has 3 or 4 statutes inside of it that you need to refer to have a complete picture of what needs to be done. So I've made a list of the related statutes and link those copies to those. I won't read word for word, because you've gotten the presentation beforehand, but these are the related statutes to the council. You have a definition section that gives a list of standards, process review, academic components, student assessment, college admissions examinations. You have the school accountability system, which I mentioned before. You have, if you've been involved in education, you know about the Every Student Succeed Act, and that's a federal law that is something that every state who's accepting federal dollars has to go by. That's mentioned in the statute, and how to do the school improvement and how it's paid for the schools that are need improvement. So we've already talked about the Noah's Ark of the meeting of the membership, but just to remind you, section 2 says the membership of the council shall be 2 parents, 2 teachers, 2 superintendents, 2 principals, 2 local school board members, 2 school district assessment coordinators, 2 employers in the state, 2 university professors with expertise in assessment and measurement, which they have not been appointed yet, but I'm sure they will very soon, and 1 member at large, so you can have an uneven number, so you can have votes. You've already done section 3, which is elected chair and a vice chair from the membership, and they will run the meetings, and you will need someone to write down the minutes. So you may want to have a secretary as well. Something that's important to know, I know we're on Zoom today, Teams today, virtually, but the statute does take into consideration that you all are all over the state, and if you were to meet in person, you would be reimbursed for actual and necessary expenses for attending the meeting or serving as a representative, like travel costs, gasoline costs, and things of that nature. The section 5 says that the council shall meet 4 times a year. I saw from the agenda, I think you've already got meetings planned out far into the future, way more than 4, so you're already on the right track with that. Lastly, the council shall be attached to the Kentucky Department of Education for administrative purposes. That's why I'm here. That's why Commissioner Glass is here, and we will help provide staff and support to reach your goal of the statute of the council. Finally, I want to talk about something important that a lot of people who are not used to having these types of roles is something called the Kentucky Open Meetings Law. We all, as public employees, know that the goal of the Open Meetings Law is to not conduct public business in private. So there are lots of rules concerning how to have a public meeting and open records requests. So today we obviously have Joy said we have 100% participation, so we have a quorum if you need to take any actions. You must make all your meetings, schedule all your meetings must be made public. You must take minutes down and they must be recorded, and they can be asked as a records request by the public. And you are allowed to have closed sessions when you have your meetings, but it needs to be announced. In other words, someone needs to say, we would like to go into closed sessions for a while, and then you must give your, why you're doing it. You go into your closed sessions and you come back. There is a list of exceptions for this, for reasons for having a secret meeting. I encourage you to look at the Open Meetings Law to see that list of exceptions. Finally, be very cognizant that people in the state can ask for documents, and we must comply under the Open Records Law. Some things that may be asked are emails, and that could be from your personal email if it includes business that you do on the council. So be cognizant that your personal email can be asked to give us a copy of something if it involves that business. If you make travel reimbursement requests, that may be requested. Obviously, I said the meetings, the agenda, all these different documents, and obviously things that I haven't listed, but these are examples that they can be asked for and must be turned over to the public. So keep it nice and clean and professional. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I just want to let everyone know that the statute is your guide, not this presentation. This is just a simple overview. And you also need to make sure that if you have a question, come to legal, come to Rhonda, and she'll come to me or another, our general counsel, Todd Allen, and we'll be happy to answer those questions. If you have any questions right now, I'd be happy to answer them. I think I know how to take and get out of this screen here. Hold on, sorry.
Any questions for Felicia? And also note that Joy said she will send us the KRS 1586452.
Yes, this is Joy. I do want to say just to reiterate what Felicia has shared with the group today. We do have a live broadcast available in the state boardroom as we speak. That's part of that open records. We have to have someone there running the meeting, just as you are sitting there we're participating in our meeting. We have that also available in the state boardroom there at the Kentucky Department of Education at Sauer Boulevard. And I just spoke with the lady that is running that today, and we have not had any visitors to arrive at the meeting yet. But we do have to have that physical live broadcast occurring during our meetings. So just something that to make you aware of that is occurring also.
If there's no other questions for me, I hope you have a prosperous and good meeting, and I bid you adieu.
Thank you, Felicia.
No problem.
So now we're going to turn to Karen Dodd, who's going to share with us some information about the Kentucky Education Summit.
Good morning. I am Karen Dodd. I'm the Chief Performance Officer here at the Kentucky Department of Education. I oversee the strategic planning and research that goes on here at the department. And let me see if I can get my PowerPoint up. And all right, is that coming through? Yes. Yes. All right.
Yes, it is, Karen.
Thank you very much. All right, let me go ahead and move forward. So what I want to share with you today, actually, Dr. Glass already shared a little bit of it. He tends to steal my thunder when he comes on. But I'm going to talk a little bit about our Advancing Education project. And this is all related to strategic planning because it's all the things that we have been doing over the past year that will lead us to our new strategic plan. And so we've put all of these initiatives under one umbrella, which we are calling the Advancing Education Project. And so the purpose of this project is to utilize effective listening techniques and co-create tools and resources with diverse stakeholders for the purpose of meeting the needs of students, families, educators, and community leaders by changing how we educate in Kentucky. So that's a mouthful. On this next slide, you're going to see all of the different initiatives that have been occurring over the past year that are leading to this change in how we do education. And so I'm going to go through each one of these in a timeline and just give you a little bit of an explanation on each one of them. So just real quick, the 7 initiatives are the Keep, Stop, Start survey, the Commissioner's Listening Tour. We've been doing Courageous Conversations. We have the Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education, which is what Dr. Glass spoke about. The Local Laboratories of Learning, which we call our L3s, the Student Mental Health Forums, and the Kentucky Future of Education Summit. So we started all of this in the fall of 2020 with the survey, and this was a survey that went out to anybody in Kentucky basically could respond to this survey, and it just asked 3 open questions. What is happening in Kentucky in education that is good that we should keep doing? What things may not be going so well that we should stop doing? And what are some innovative things that you think we should be doing? So what do we need to start doing? We had an okay response on that survey, but it was also in the throes of the pandemic. So we saw a lot of things that reflected the pandemic itself. And we were really wanting to go broader than the pandemic. So from there, we decided to do the listening tour. So that's how that came about, which took place in March through May. We had a total of, I believe, 12 different sessions as part of that listening tour. We divided them out by Kentucky regions, educational regions. We did 2 in Louisville. We had 1 just for the deaf, and we had 1 just in Spanish. So those were fairly well attended. We got a lot of input from that listening tour. We did what we call empathy interviews, and these courageous conversations that you see right underneath the listening tour here are things that we did at the same time. So an empathy interview is asking someone a question and really diving deep into their response. So it's not about asking a lot of questions. And in these listening tours, we really only asked anywhere from 4 to 8 questions over a 2-hour period. And it was really about listening to the stories that all of these stakeholders who attended had to share with us. So it might be a question like, when was the last time you received feedback from your school? So we want to hear that from a parent perspective, from a student perspective, and then really dig into their response. You know, how did that make you feel? What could have been different? What might have been better? Really getting the most that we could out of their responses. From there, we went into the coalition. This was made up of about 62 stakeholders, again, across Kentucky. We chose some of them, about a third of them came from people who attended the listening tours. During the listening tours, we asked people if they wanted to be a part of the coalition, so they could apply to be a part of the coalition. So a third of them came from those applications. We had some that the Kentucky Department of Education appointed, so people that we felt, this would be legislators, maybe some community members, people that we wanted to pull in, others who may not have a voice in education very often. So we did some outreach and tried to find people who may have something important to say, but aren't typically in those conversations. So that was really important to us to really get full scope of stakeholders. During the coalition, and they met every Tuesday throughout this past June, they really focused on all of that data that came into us from the listening tours and from the surveys, and they created what we are calling profile. So a profile of a student. You know, as we asked these questions, what was coming clear to us about how students feel? What does a student really look like? And we came up with several profiles for each one of our stakeholder groups. And those stakeholder groups were students, parents or family members, school leaders, district leaders, and community leaders. And so each one of those stakeholder groups had several different profiles that were created, some of them positive, some of them not so positive. And then what we did was we took those profiles and said, okay, what would we want those experiences or those profiles to look like in the future? So if we saw something where maybe a parent profile said that there's not good communication, they weren't getting the message that was coming out from school, something like that, what would that look like in the future? What do we want good communication to look like? Or if they had issues with our assessments, what would we want their experience to look like in the future? So from there, we created a future state document, and that's what was just shared with you, I believe, in the chat. So please do look at that. We've got some really good stuff in there. We've got the full report that is out on our website, as well as an executive summary, which is about 9 pages long. And we really encourage everyone to look at that. From that work, we will be developing our strategic plan moving forward. We also had in September and October student mental health forums. This was run by our lieutenant governor, and she pulled in, first started with our students from the Commissioner's Student Advisory Council. So they really helped with developing questions that would be asked during these forums. And they also helped to pull in other kids who could participate in these mental health forums. They shared during the summit the experience that they had being a part of these mental health forums. And I believe it's something that's going to move forward. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I've heard rumors that it is something that they're going to continue to do with students because they had such success with it. Then we have in November, of course, November 1st and 2nd is when we held our education summit. And we, as Dr. Glass mentioned, we had close to 700 people who attended that. It was a lot of sit and get. We had a lot of national speakers come as well as some local speakers. We talked a lot about what happened with the coalition and what's going to be happening with our L3s as we move forward. It was very well received. We did some surveys during the sessions, and are planning to do some more of those surveys from the folks who attended. We also surveyed our own staff to see how they felt about running the whole thing and what we could do better in the future. So far, the responses we've gotten have been very positive. We haven't quite decided if that's going to be something that we do on an annual or maybe every other year basis. But hopefully we will do something similar to it again in the future, because it was very well received and very well attended. That takes us to the current work, which is the local laboratories of learning. This is where we are now. So they're really getting kicked off. They are just forming. And I'm not going to say too much about that, because I know we've got Sarah Snipes coming up next, and she's going to talk to you in a lot of detail about the L3. So I will stop there unless there are any questions for me.
Thank you, Karen. While people are thinking of questions, I'm going to start with one. Karen, you heard Felicia kind of charge us with our responsibility of what we need to review and study. As a key, what would be some key takeaways from the conversations and the listening tour that you think would be very important for this committee to really focus in on?
That's a really good question. Well, you all are focusing, of course, on assessment and accountability, and that has come up in all of the discussions that we had. It was pretty prominent even at the summit. And I think what we're really hearing is that, those annual tests that we do they cause a lot of heartache for a lot of people. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it, but I think that's something that you all really need to think about. I think looking at what is in that report specifically around assessment and accountability, we really do want to include stakeholder feedback on everything that we're doing. And I think that assessment and accountability is something that we need to think about in our strategic planning as well. That's why all of this is so tightly tied together. So the things that you talk about and decisions that you make definitely be considered in our strategic planning. So I really do encourage you to reach out to the folks that you're representing and look at the things that have already been put in place that and really keep in mind what would be best for everyone and what's being asked.
Thank you, Karen. Anybody else with a question? You can either type it in the chat. Martha, you have a question?
Yes, I want to make sure the report you're referencing, what is the title of that report? When we go to look through, for me, I feel like I've gotten a lot of information, a lot of links, and I want to know specifically what the title is.
It's the United We Learn report, and okay. Jana Beth did put it up in, there's a link to it early in your chat.
Okay, I thought that might be it.
Yep, that's it.
And there's an executive summary of that, and that's what Karen referenced. And so that the link I typed gets you to the whole United We Learn page. And then from there, you can decide how deep into that report you want to go.
And
Thank you, Martha.
It looks like, okay, you got it. Sorry, go ahead.
Any other questions for Karen? Okay, Karen, I know we're working on all of our strategic plans and school improvement and district improvement plans in the field. And so we look forward to seeing KDE's new strategic plan come out as well.
Great, so thanks so much.
Karen gave Sarah kind of an entryway, and we're excited to hear from Sarah, who's going to give us an overview of the local laboratories of learning. This is the L3 work. Sarah?
Thank you, and good morning. I'm Sarah Snipes. I work in the we've adjusted our title. You may have heard of us as the Division of Innovation at the Kentucky Department of Education. We are adjusting that title to more accurately reflect the work that we do, and that is the Division of Innovative Learning. So we are pivoting there a little bit, but still deeply ingrained in the work across the state. And I manage, my primary role is to manage the Kentucky Innovative Learning Network, which hosts about 38 districts across the Commonwealth. And we meet regularly to kind of launch some of these efforts with some of our most eager leaders, district leaders, and schools in the state. So with that comes the local laboratories of learning, who are a group of districts all housed within that Innovative Learning Network. And I will get my slides pulled up here as well. There we go. So as Karen mentioned, the local laboratories of learning are kind of the next step in the Advancing Education project. Our leaders of these districts have been participants throughout this process so far. They were members of the Kentucky Coalition that Karen mentioned as well. And so now they're launching and replicating a bit of that process in local communities. So I referenced back here for a moment to something that Dr. Glass mentioned as well, because all of these pieces fit together so intricately. I put two quotes on here from Lou Young, the chair of KBE, as well as Aaron Thompson, an ex officio member, just to remind us of the charge of this project that goes back to the Board of Education's equity resolution, and just the challenge that was proposed to us not only at KDE in our division, but as a cross-agency effort that has really taken off in a successful way to challenge us to think unconventionally, to serve all of our students, and to just work toward an inclusive, equitable future for Kentucky. So we're holding these this equity resolution close to our hearts as we work through this project. This references the L3 work, but also the greater scope of the Advancing Education project. There are several goals in this work, and our L3s, as they dive into their co-creation, they're working to create new approaches for local accountability and assessment to bring the greatest positive impact to those currently least well served. They're also working to influence KDE's thinking. They're working to shape Kentucky policy. And if needed, they're going to push for greater federal flexibility as well. Goal 3 in this project is to start deepening partnerships and trust among teachers, families, learners, and school district leadership in each of our communities. And through all of this, we hope to create tangible shifts in policy, mindsets, and habits throughout our entire education system. So at the heart of the project and what we're hoping to accomplish through the L3s is this concept of reciprocal learning and accountability, understanding that our school districts are accountable to our students and our families, and also there's a shared responsibility and accountability back into that relationship as well. And that also cycles up through not only our local communities and school districts, but at the state education level, and as well as at the state government level as well. So we want to start breaking down those barriers, and we want to reduce the inferences that we make at the department, at the government level, about what districts and communities need. And we want to start bringing people together to co-create based on the needs of communities. So here on the screen, you'll see our full L3 districts. These are the 7 school districts who are currently launching. They are actually this Thursday going to engage in their 3rd work session. So Allen County, Fleming County, Frankfort Independent, Jefferson County, Johnson County, Logan County, and Shelby County are all actively in the trenches here, designing with local members of their communities new local-based assessment and accountability measures. We also have a set of associate L3 districts who are currently kind of in a fishbowl, if you will, through this process. They have been paired strategically with one of our full members based on district size or geographical location, and they are learning alongside our full members. They're in every session. They're superintendent or chief academic officer is really watching this process very closely so that they can be ready to become the next cohort of full districts in 2022 and launch in their local communities as well. So as Karen mentioned, with the coalition, the statewide coalition, we took a really radically inclusive take on membership. We know how councils typically work. We know how committees work when we bring people to the table who have expertise in this area. And of course, those voices are valued and those opinions are necessary. But if we want something different, we recognize that we had to do something differently. And part of that approach was through our recruitment efforts. So we brought in those 3 groups of stakeholders in the statewide coalition, but we also replicated that system in our local communities. So each of those 7 districts you saw as full members on the previous screen, they worked over the last few months to recruit very intentionally these 3 groups as well. So there were about 10 members on a 30 member coalition. About 10 of those are intended to be district recruited folks. So critical stakeholders they know need to be in this conversation based on expertise and involvement in the district or community. They also had an open recruitment process. They developed open applications that were sent broadly throughout their community, and anyone interested in participating could apply. And then another third of their group, as mentioned in the statewide coalition, was intentionally selected through data systems, whether it be Infinite Campus. We've had folks target students with behavioral issues, digging into those data systems, just being really intentional to bring on members of their community that may not often have access to the opportunity to participate in conversations such as this. So now each of those 7 districts have a coalition of about 30 members. Now what we are doing is we're digging into a design process. This is replicated from the D. Stanford design process. And we're taking each of these 30 member coalitions through the process of empathizing with their local community members, defining challenges and themes, ideating possible ways to address those challenges, and then from there they'll be prototyping new models of assessment and testing those prototypes in order to inform the statewide coalition, KDE, and the Board of Education. I wanted to also go back to a few of the products that were created from our statewide coalition over the summer, because these are 4 invaluable tools that the L3s are holding close to their design work. They're using the current state report to look at the user experiences across the state, but they've also gone back out and they've done additional empathy interviews in their local community, and they've begun to refine those user profiles to make sure that it not only represents a statewide user experience, but that if I'm in Logan County and I'm on our coalition working through a design of a better assessment system, I have some unique insights from people in Logan County, and I've refined those user profiles to better represent our community. So they're using the current state report. They're also looking to that future state report to generate, to look at themes and ideas for how Kentuckians have authentically expressed through their own experiences what they hope comes from this process. The the co-creation guidebook was another resource created by the statewide coalition, and that helps guide the L3s through the process. It's also a great tool that future districts will have. So those associate members, as well as additional cohorts over the next several years, as they get ready to prepare this work and be part of this work voluntarily, they'll have a guidebook that walks them through the process, helps them form their inclusive coalitions, and guides them through the design. And then we have our learning agenda, which is a set of questions that need to be answered and explored in order to get to that future vision. It's a tough challenge. We're bringing these diverse voices together to wrestle with some very complex questions and themes. And our learning agenda is kind of the bridge, if you will, between the current state and the future state. So it's how we get to that envisioned future state.
Hey, Sarah, can I stop you for a moment and ask you to go back to the slide that shows the districts? Martha raised a great question. She would like to know how the districts were chosen for this first round and also the second rounds.
Great question. So as I mentioned, the Kentucky Innovative Learning Network has about 38 districts who have who apply each year and or are invited to participate. So all of the members you see on the screen are committed members who have signed a letter of commitment to that network. That's the partnership between KDE and local school districts across the state. The first 7 that you see were recruited for participation because they have been involved previously in the Kentucky Competency Education and Assessment Consortium. So my supervisor, David Cook, had kind of led that work over a series of years. And these districts we felt were most well equipped for the kind of design process. The capacity is there from previous work to continue that was interrupted by COVID. So that's kind of how those first 7 were selected. The second 7 were in a similar way. Mostly they were all invited at once. The associate members were those who said, we feel less confident in the capacity currently. Maybe it was due to administrative changes or they were working through some things with COVID and they felt a little bit more limited than the original 7. But they raised their hand to say, we still want to participate, but let's take a minute and let's organize and let's walk through the process first. So that's a little bit how our associate members came to be as well. And then we do have a 3rd cohort planned, but that group has not been selected at all. And what we hope to do is partner potentially with the Pritchard Committee, perhaps, or just word of mouth has been a tremendous tool for us. We hope that the 3rd coalition actually is a community demanded and voluntarily selected group that says, hey, we're hearing about this work, we want to participate. I really am very hopeful that that 3rd group is a groundswell of local communities out there in the Kentucky who demand and want to participate.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, reciprocal learning partnerships, here you can see that in a more concrete way with our local L3s. The L3s will be learning throughout this process and they'll be informing the Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education that was created at that statewide level. That work will also be informing KDE and the board, and then we'll use that as well to inform federal and state government. So this is just a reciprocal learning partnership where we're no longer putting demands and expectations down on our local school districts and communities, but instead welcoming in on that conversation, having them be a part of the design and welcoming that feedback throughout. So where are the L3s now? We've officially launched on October 21st as a soft launch ahead of the Education Summit. During that session, the communities came together, again, 30 members from those 7 different communities, as well as the leaders from the associate member districts, and they worked to develop an understanding of those current future state reports. So we really dug into those a little bit. And again, we have folks from, we have folks completely unrelated to the education field in these calls. And so we did a lot of ground level setting with folks to understand what is assessment, what is accountability, and what does that mean. We examined those user profiles that Karen mentioned and really got to know the needs of people in our system. And then we practiced with that group how to conduct empathy interviews so that they could, again, go out in their local communities and do another set of empathy interviews so they could refine their local profiles. On session 2, November 4th, that was after the Education Summit, we came back together and we used those empathy interviews to refine user profiles. So now we have a set that even better reflects local context. And we started to look at the current themes of education here in Kentucky based on that report we mentioned. And we determined in each of these communities, what is the key theme that's emerging for us? So if you look in that report, you'll notice 10 themes for the current state. Each L3 has now determined which one they feel their community is gravitating towards based on their empathy interviews. And now on Thursday night this week, we'll engage in session 3, where we're going to dig deeper into what is federal and state accountability, some more level setting there. And they're going to begin to define what assets do we have now at the local level in our assessment and accountability systems, and then what challenges exist. And then from there, with those challenges, they're going to begin to ideate ways that they can improve upon those and address those challenges in their local communities. So to support this work, because we know that this is a heavy lift and we want to show at all aspects and levels of KDE that districts are supported in this process, we have created a core design team, the Center for Innovation and Education, which is housed out of Lexington, Kentucky, and founded by Jean Wilhoit, a former commissioner here in Kentucky, as well as KDE, Karen Perry from the UK Center for Next Generation Leadership, and a member of the Kentucky Student Voice team. So yes, we have a high school student right on our core design team. We design each L3 session that I mentioned on the previous slide, and we also work one-on-one with an assigned community. So for example, a team member of mine at KDE is working very closely with Johnson County so that as they progress through the system, they have a point of contact with KDE, but they also have someone who is becoming deeply ingrained in their local context and the work that they're producing. And then we also have an L3 Leads community of practice, and this is a space where the district leader, usually the superintendent or chief academic officer, and their appointed community co-leader, so someone who has great influence in the community, they come together in a shared space where they get to prep for facilitation for these sessions. They get to share with us their needs, the issues that they may see arising, and they can just discuss this process with us on a more intimate level. And I just want to mention a kind of an innovative approach that we're starting to take with this effort. Outside of KDE, CIE, UK, we know that we're going to need additional supports to help districts implement the prototypes that they create and test those at larger scale. So we are using and leveraging some of the ESSER funds to help support our L3s. We are currently requesting applications from nationally recognized vendors and partners who are experts and have experience in designing, consulting, and policy services. And we're kind of going to create kind of a collective clearinghouse collaboration effort for them to come together and support our districts. What we're not doing here is asking an organization to come in and take the reins and tell a community what they're going to do next and how they're going to create a more student-centered environment. We're going to hold that space, and when a district and community comes to us with ideas, kind of play matchmaker and say, well, this partner has a really good experience in this area. They have the tools and support to help make that possible for you and kind of make that partnership for them. And so that's just kind of another element of support that we're providing as districts create and test their prototypes. Here's just another example of that. It gives us a flexibility to pair vendors with L3s based on the unique needs that they come up with. So here on the screen, I've just linked two things. Again, you have the report, but you could scan that with your smart device as well and get that pulled up. And then I also referenced the project storyboard. This was co-created by I know Houston Barber here is on the call, one of our superintendents of an L3 community. It was co-created by him as well as Susan Dougal out of Shelby County and our CIE team and KDE teams. And we share that just as a quick reference of scope of this project as a whole. It's very complex and there are lots of parts, but sometimes that storyboard help really get at the process and our hopes for what we accomplish through this project. And I just have our emails up here. I've included David Cook, the director of our division, as well, as he's kind of co-leading this work with me as well. So feel free if you have questions, if you think of them later and want to reach out, we'd be happy to talk with you more in detail.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. A couple of things, if you didn't notice it, Henry Webb, superintendent, encouraged us to check out the work of John Tanner. He speaks on community-based accountability. And for those of you who can make it to the December meeting with the superintendents, he will be a speaker there. Sarah, are you going to share the PowerPoint with Joy so it can be dropped in our meeting folder? I don't know if anybody else was trying to take notes.
Yes, absolutely. I think I've shared a link in a Google Doc earlier, but
okay. Any other questions for Sarah?
I will say with regards to John Tanner, I believe they have access to our application as well to kind of be a support partner in this work. So absolutely on our radar, yes.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. We appreciate it and look forward to hearing more updates. And I think the storyboards are fascinating. And so be sure to check those out. Okay, at this time, I think we have Thomas, who's going to share with us the high quality instructional resources.
Jana Beth, this is Joy. I think that Misty Higgins is going to be actually presenting today for Thomas, and they're doing it as a team. So we'll turn it over to Misty.
It's all yours, Misty.
Good morning. First of all, let me, Carrie, can you see the slide deck now?
I can.
Okay. And is it just showing the full screen of the slide deck?
It is.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. And actually, who you have here with you today, first of all, my name is Misty Higgins, and I see a lot of familiar faces that I've met along the way on this call today who's a part of this advisory. So good morning to everyone. But my name is Misty Higgins, and I am a professional learning coordinator in the Division of Program Standards in the Office of Teaching and Learning here at the Kentucky Department of Education. And joining me is my colleague, Carrie McDaniel, who is the other professional learning coordinator in the Division of Program Standards. And, you know, it's always hard when I know you've been sitting here listening for quite a while, and here we come with some more information to give you with a little bit of brain overload. So I apologize because I know it probably feels like a ton of information coming at you today, but we really appreciate you giving us some of your time. And really what we're going to be focusing on is just updating you on our current work around how designing a local high quality curriculum can support standards implementation and promote student equity. And just from a high level perspective, one of the best ways I think to think about this work is about creating instructional coherence at the local level, where you really have alignment between the standards, the local curriculum, the instructional resources, the assessments students are being given at the classroom level, and the instructional practices being used, all in alignment both within grade levels, across grade levels, so that you are really solidifying and strengthening that student experience. So that's really at the heart of this work. And a little bit earlier, they were mentioning that resolution and how that is really guiding a lot of what we are doing. Well, that holds true to our work as well. So to address the issue of student equity, in July of 2020, the Kentucky Board of Education passed a resolution affirming its commitment to racial equity across Kentucky public schools. And that resolution states that every student in the Commonwealth deserves equitable access to effective educators who have unique experiences and perspectives, quality preparation, and are committed to the success of all learners. So when we think about this resolution, we then need to consider what are specific actions that we as educators need to take to ensure equitable access to learning for all students across Kentucky. Well, it starts with that local school and district implementation of the Kentucky academic standards, and then providing both students and teachers with access to high quality standards aligned curriculum and instructional resources that are designed to help students meet the grade level expectations within the CAS. Now, one of the main resources that we have available to support schools and districts in this work is the Model Curriculum Framework. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with this document. We began revising it 2 years ago, and a little bit later, we're going to put links to all of this in the chat for you. But as you can see from that table of contents, there is a lot of information contained within that document. But one of the key areas addressed is that designing a local curriculum aligned to the CAS. So there are 3 specific sections that support that work at the local level. First of all, section 1. This is the introduction, and it differentiates the role of standards, curriculum, and instructional resources, as well as who has the responsibility for each as defined in Kentucky law. And then section 2, this is the curriculum development process. So it just outlines a possible process that a school or a district can use to design that local curriculum that is aligned to the Kentucky academic standards. And then Appendix A, this is the toolkit that we've created that contains multiple tools and resources to support the local implementation of that curriculum development process. Now, one of the keys to really understanding all of this work is knowing how each of these terms are defined in Kentucky law. So in Kentucky, standards address the foundational framework of what is to be learned. So they establish the minimum of what students have to know and be able to do by the end of each grade level. So the standards are the what. Curriculum addresses how learning experiences are designed at the local level. So the purpose of the curriculum is to focus and connect the work of classroom teachers across a school or a district to the standards, assessments, and the instructional practices necessary for students to reach those grade level expectations. So the curriculum is the how. And then instructional resources are defined as the print, non-print, or electronic medium designed to assist student learning. So the key there is assist, because no one instructional resource or program should be the entire curriculum for a school or a district, because no singular instructional resource is going to be 100% aligned to the Kentucky academic standards, nor will a singular resource likely give the teacher the full array of pedagogical supports needed to help students reach those grade level expectations. So in Kentucky, the instructional resources support the implementation of a locally developed curriculum that is aligned to the Kentucky academic standards. And so to help schools and districts in designing that local curriculum, that's what Section 2 of that model curriculum framework is about. It just lays out a process that they can use, and there are 4 phases to that process. And it's important that those phases are completed in the order in which they are written, because they're designed to where the work of one phase is then going to support the work and drive the work of the next phase. Now, as we listen to feedback from the Quality Curriculum Task Force, and that is a group that we have worked with since 2019 to help greatly inform this process, they highlighted the need for more support and guidance specifically around Phase 3, Step 5, in the identification and selection of instructional resources and professional learning necessary to support implementation. And the need for more support and guidance in this area, it matches back to that KBE resolution of making sure we are providing equitable access to both students and educators. And we all know that the need for this has definitely been elevated as a result of the pandemic. We do want to show you what we currently have available to support the local evaluation and selection of instructional resources. And those are our instructional resources alignment rubrics. So you can use these to help you as you evaluate resources for their alignment to the Kentucky academic standards. And they're located on kystandards.org. And again, we're going to give you all of those links in the chat in just a bit. And you can see the different content areas in which we have those rubrics available. We know that schools and districts have faced so many challenges when it comes to instructional resources, and that the pandemic likely added to those challenges, because in the same school year the pandemic started, the state rolled out 3 new sets of standards. And we know that that likely hindered many schools and districts from even finding the time, the space, or the resources to align their local curriculum and instructional resources to those new standards. So what we are currently working to do is to expand our support and guidance in this area to really help schools and districts select instructional resources that promote student equity as well as access to grade level instruction. And that brings us to our HQIR strategic plan. Now, the goal of the work that we are currently undertaking is really to empower schools and districts with the information needed to provide teachers with access to high quality instructional resources and high quality professional learning that once again promote that student equity as well as access to grade level instruction. And as a part of this work, we have been communicating and promoting KDE's definition and rationales for HQIRs and HQPL. And we are focusing our work in year 1 on reading and writing, with the goal of creating a consumer guide that we will share with schools and districts that's going to create or include selection criteria and evaluation tools to support that local selection of reading and writing high quality instructional resources. So we plan to release that consumer guide in summer of 2022. So we're currently working now to get that consumer guide out. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to hand it over to Carrie, and Carrie's just going to walk you through how is KDE defining high quality instructional resources? How are those different from than just the regular instructional resource definition, as well as what do we mean by high quality professional learning and why those are so important?
Thank you, Misty. So the Kentucky Department of Education defines HQIRs as materials that are aligned with Kentucky academic standards, research-based and or externally validated, comprehensive to include engaging texts, problems, and assessments. So by comprehensive, we mean that the resources address the full scope of the standards for each grade, and they include an array of pedagogical and instructional supports to meet the diverse needs of all students. And by text, we mean both print and non-print resources, including books, multimedia presentations, videos, etc. So when we talk about culturally relevant, free from bias, really thinking about acknowledging students' ethnic, racial, and linguistic identities within the context of their grade level work in a way that is not clouded by unnecessary barriers that get in the way of student learning. And materials that are accessible for all students. So ensuring equitable opportunities for all students regardless of their unique experiences and qualities, so students can engage meaningfully in the learning process and have an opportunity to fully demonstrate their thinking. So we know HQIRs are an equity issue for both students and for teachers. We know that when teachers do not have access to high quality instructional resources, they spend on average 7 to 12 hours per week searching for resources online. However, sometimes the quality of those resources are lacking, and studies by Marcy Goldberg have found that students of color from low-income families are impacted most. In fact, a 2017 RAND study supports that this is a common occurrence because 96% of teachers surveyed use Google, and 75% of teachers were using Pinterest to find their lessons and resources online. The Fordham Institute actually conducted a review of those instructional resources and found that 64% of those resources should, quote, not be used or are probably not worth using, end quote. On the websites they reviewed, a majority of the materials were rated a 0 or a 1 on an overall 0 to 3 quality scale. Because of the growing limits on teachers' time, often what is most readily available is what we know teachers tend to gravitate to most. So it becomes increasingly more important for teachers to have access to high quality instructional resources that support the needs of their students as they implement grade level appropriate assignments and professional learning that increases their content knowledge in that implementation. High quality instructional resources are a matter of student equity. According to a Johns Hopkins study conducted by David Steiner in 2017, students in classrooms that use just one high quality instructional resource for 4 consecutive years outpace comparison students by a margin of 38 percentile points. That's equivalent to 4 additional years of learning. Another study found that the average cost effectiveness ratio of switching to high quality instructional resources is almost 40 times that of class size reduction. So simply put, HQIRs are one of the most cost effective ways we can increase student achievement. And furthermore, due to the pandemic, it is more important than ever that we choose high yield strategies and practices that equate to more than 1 year's growth in 1 year's time to really accelerate student learning. And we can begin this work by giving our teachers and students access to high quality instructional resources. So we know that providing teachers with a set of instructional resources without providing them with professional learning focused on how to implement those resources effectively will not impact student achievement. So HQIRs and HQPL, high quality professional learning, go hand in hand in providing equitable opportunities for students and teachers. And we know from research that access to a local curriculum and high quality instructional resources aligned to the CAS is not enough to ensure equity in all classrooms. Teachers need high quality professional learning that equips them to successfully implement the curriculum. So this slide, as you can see, highlights the main characteristics of high quality professional learning outlined in the research. And just to kind of draw attention there to the first one, aligned with state standards, school and or district goals and professional learning. So ensuring that those are aligned to your district CSIP and CDIP goals. Content focus, so really thinking about, are they including all of the disciplines, math, science, reading, social studies? And sustained and continuous, are these a one and done professional learning approach, or are they ongoing support where teachers have an opportunity to really reflect and receive coaching and support? And so we do have 2 flyers that you can use in your schools and districts that will assist you in communicating the rationale and research behind why high quality instructional resources and high quality professional learning are needed. We'll be adding that in the chat box for you. And then following the unprecedented interruptions to schooling resulting from COVID-19 over the last year, states, districts, and schools are now working to retool their systems and structures to ensure that they are able to equitably support all students. And recognizing the importance of HQIRs and professional development in its efforts to equitably support all students, the KDE is embarking on a pilot to support districts and schools in this area connected to the model curriculum framework that Misty talked about earlier. To really address the diverse accelerated learning needs of students, there's a great need for schools and districts to develop coherent curriculum that intentionally connects standards, instruction, and formative assessment across classrooms. And we are seeking the participation of up to 32 schools from approximately 12 districts representing the 8 cooperative regions. And this would account for participation of 2 to 3 schools per district. And the application process will consist of answering a few questions and uploading artifacts. And so we do not want the application to be a deterrent from participation from schools and districts. And so when we look at the timeline here, the KDE pilot will offer professional learning support to schools and districts as they begin to implement the curriculum development process and work to understand how they will begin to embed high quality instructional resource selection within that process. So here you see the timeline for our pilot. The pilot will provide schools and districts with free professional learning, as well as resources and guidance in the creation of their own local curriculum aligned to the CAS for reading and writing, and for the evaluation and selection of high quality reading and writing resources that align with their locally developed curriculum and to the reading and writing standards. We will then use the feedback we gather from the pilot to assist us in really refining our high quality resource work moving forward. And so we want to open it up to you all at this time and see if you have any recommendations or feedback on additional supports for schools and districts regarding the local curriculum development process and or the selection and evaluation of high quality instructional resources. So really, how do we build a better awareness around these definitions and the existing resources to support this important work?
Thank you, Misty and Carrie. If you haven't noticed, Carrie did pop in a couple of resources in the chat, so make sure you check those out. I do have a question to get us started. How does this work connect to the national work like Ed Reports? It seems like it's a bit of a duplication.
It is somewhat going to be, so when we talk about that consumer guide, for example, because again, what you have to realize is different states as well as publishers, they are going to use the terms curriculum and instructional resources differently than we define them here in Kentucky. Many of them, like textbook publishers, for example, they're going to call their resource their curriculum. And that is not the case. We went back, like I said earlier, no one resource is going to be 100% aligned to the Kentucky academic standards. So within the consumer guide that we are creating for reading and writing, one of the things that it will do is it will direct you to Ed Reports website, because Ed Reports are going to vet resources in alignment to the national. They're really looking more at, I think, the Common Core standards still than the Kentucky standards, but we're working with them on that. So that would become the starting point for schools and districts, is what does Ed Reports have that's rated green, meaning that it's at least 80% aligned to the standards. But then that also means that 20% is missing out of those resources from the standards, as well as what is our local context? What are we doing to ensure that we are truly providing that equitable access to our students within the context of our local community? So that's where the additional evaluation tools and those resources will come into play. So it's using the vetted resources that are green as a starting point, and then using other local contexts to help really determine the resources that can support teachers in that community in reaching those expectations in the CAS.
Thank you. And just another question about the pilot. So is it your all's intent that there would be some creation of instructional resources, that teachers would be writing those, or is it pulling together a set of resources to create a curriculum?
The latter of what you just said, Jenna-Beth. It is about giving teachers what they would need to then utilize their resources to create the local curriculum that a classroom teacher could then pick up instead of searching for resources all the time. Utilize the local curriculum that's mapped to the high quality instructional resource for that classroom implementation. Did that make sense how I said that?
Yes, thank you. Other questions from the committee?
And I will say, you can see Carrie has popped a couple of more links for you in the chat, one of which is a link to that pilot. We also have on KY Standards, we did a technical assistance. So if you have questions about the pilot, chances are they were addressed within that technical assistance, and the recording of that is also available on kystandards.org. And the application window closes next Tuesday. So just kind of want to put that out there, that does close next Tuesday.
Hi, thank you for this. I'm Renee Boss. I've spent a lifetime doing curriculum work, so I highly value all of this work. I do have a question about how the work with the standards and high quality resources will connect to the L3 work that we heard Sarah Snipes talk about.
I think one of the easiest ways that I can say that, and I'm not as involved in that side, so please keep that in mind, and I would not want to speak for any of the L3 people and their work, but at the core of everything we do in Kentucky law, it all has to be grounded back in the Kentucky academic standards. By law, everything must connect back to that. So even in those schools of innovation, in what they're doing, that work and that instructional coherence they're creating should still align back to the standards. It's what they're looking at is what might be some innovative ways of which we are assessing students' mastery of those standards.
Thank you.
So your second question was that how to build awareness, and I still think we struggle with this a lot. We struggle at the national level because people interchange curriculum and instructional materials back and forth. I do think once we start to see some examples of what has been designed as curriculum, it's going to help. And I don't know if in your definition of curriculum, it's ultimately how you're using the instructional resources. And I think it's almost like a layered approach. So even in the listing of the definitions, you know, you've got standards that's over everything, and then you have curriculum, and instructional resources actually fall under curriculum. And so that might help as you think about that definition. So just a suggestion. I do want to share from the field that I understand why you started with reading and writing. It's a cornerstone, but where there are not a lot of resources, obviously, and where we need most specific work in Kentucky because there lacks alignment at the national level is in the field of social studies. And so I know there's a tendency to want to then move to mathematics, but speaking from someone who spends a great deal of time working in curriculum and instructional resources, we need the department to take the lead on social studies. We can't create high quality instructional resources and design curriculum and teach our students and close achievement gaps. And there's just nothing out there in social studies. And what we are seeing is just outrageously expensive. Anything that comes close to being a high quality resource is not sustainable from the expense point. So
well, and I would just add to that, Jana Beth, from our experience, that's a national level issue as well. Even in working with Ed Reports, like they have trouble finding vendors that are creating social studies instructional resources to even really be able to evaluate and vet. And while it will be a little bit of time before we can have the consumer guide out for social studies, I will always direct people back to the instructional resources alignment rubrics, because that is something that will support that evaluation now, because that tool has been specified to Kentucky social studies standards to ensure that you are at least evaluating through that lens. Where we feel like the instructional rubrics miss the boat a little bit, where we're really wanting to expand, is on that equity lens. That's not something it's going to take a look at as in depth as we would like. And so that's what we're really working to expand. But in terms of alignment to the standards, I recommend going back to those instructional resources.
okay, thank you, Misty and Carrie. As always, very informative and organized. I appreciate the questions for feedback. At this time, if there aren't any more questions, oh, and Jenny just said here, here, and gave you all a shout out through if you didn't see the chats. But
actually, Jana Beth, she was giving that to you on the social studies.
Probably because it's a nightmare. I can just say trying to find inquiry-based resources that meet the Kentucky academic standards. I have 9:43. You all have been sitting and attending to the meeting for 1 hour and 43 minutes, probably a little too long. And so we are going to take a 10-minute break and convene at 9:53 if you're Central Time, 10:53 if you're Eastern Time. So we're going to take a quick break and then we'll come back and hear from Rhonda and Jennifer. Thank you. Okay, I hope everybody came back. It's always hard to tell when you let everyone go on a virtual break, but we are done with our 10-minute break and we have one major item left on the agenda, and that is an assessment and accountability update from Rhonda and Jennifer.
Thank you, Jana Beth. Again, a pleasure to be back with you. We have been hearing about some really exciting future work with our presentations from Karen Dodd and Sarah Snipes, as well as what's happening with the Office of Teaching and Learning. And the work, as Sarah talked about, there is a prototype process going on now as the local levels are getting their coalitions engaged and fully functioning and start talking about local accountability, as well as trying out some assessment ideas. And so it takes a while, obviously, for these things to fully scale up to be implemented at a state level, and a lot of detail along that way. So what we'd like to share with you is kind of where we are for the current school year we're in. Because obviously this discussion on the more future, we're kind of, I think the way I would think about it is we're in the near future and the little bit more out there future. And so we want to make sure that the conversation, that you're well aware of where we are with sort of our current plan federally and what is being prepared for assessment this spring. And, we've had obviously a very challenging experience, just as you have in life and with schools and instruction with the world of assessment accountability during COVID as well. So we did have assessments last year. Kentucky assessed anywhere from about 70% of our students at the high school level up to, I would say, something like around close to 90 at the elementary level. And that varies a little bit across districts and across schools. So we did have our district assessment coordinators, two of who serve with this group, as well as others in the state, that really made extraordinary efforts to get kids in and get them tested. And so hopefully it gave back some detail of at least where students were along that performance level for students of novice, apprentice, proficient, and distinguished. So we have a few slides here. Jennifer and I have shared these with our assessment coordinators, and Janabeth and Heather were gracious enough to say, yes, we think this would be a good one to share with the group as a whole. And so Jennifer Stafford, I think she is on as well. She is managing the slides here, and we'll just kind of launch right in, and we'll pause obviously periodically, see what questions you might have, but just really focusing on where we are in this academic year. And because we did not have formal accountability, we released fall results recently, but no formal accountability. So Jennifer, I think we're probably ready to just advance to the next slide.
Okay, I was going to check to see, you can see the presentation?
Yes, yes, I can. And then I see some lovely faces as well on my gallery view. So the agenda of what we'd like to share with you today is just a little bit about public reporting. I gave you sort of a little preview in those opening remarks. We'll talk a little bit about data suppression that is a result of a federal audit and how that played out this year. Then what are the assessment plans for the 21-22? And these are the plans where we will be compliant federally with what is expected with federal assessment and accountability processes that releases title funds to the state of Kentucky. So that's the really the carrot there to make sure that states have compliant systems. And then Jennifer's going to highlight some resources that have recently come out of her shop. And we'll talk a little bit about supplemental year, and then we'll highlight just really just connecting back to what you've heard today about the Advancing Ed project a little bit. So we'll just kick it right off with slide 3 there. Or wait, before we do that, Jennifer, I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to say in terms of opening before we move forward to talk about the slides themselves.
No, I think that what our goal here today is to give a picture and a view of where we are currently with the discussion, and as we move into the 21-22 school year. So there's going to be some expectations federally that we have to meet, and we're going to explain where we stand in our plans to meet those expectations.
Great, great. So let's go ahead and advance to 3. So as we mentioned, we did have public assessment result reporting this year. We were very much focused on don't compare this data to prior experience data because we didn't have all students testing. While we had really, I think Kentucky did well with the amount of testing. We're somewhere in the middle of the pack, maybe upper middle. There are some states that tested nearly every student as a typical year. Those were states that maybe had not been out of instruction physically in person as much, or there were a few states that did some in remote testing where students tested from home. But we do know there are states that probably tested only about 25% of their students or even less. So again, we feel very positive about the efforts that district and school-based people made to try to have Kentucky students assessed. And remember, we weren't very much back into school full-time when those assessments rolled around in the spring of 21. So in the fall of 21, then we released on October, the final data review ended on October 8th. We released in September. That's just the required 10-day cleanup period. Now, we did our normal processes of cleaning up data with districts. We feel very committed to that process. We were able then to have updated spreadsheets of information back out to schools on October 20th. But those updated really looked at data suppression. We were in our last audit federally, we were told that we did not suppress enough data. And this is all based into, can you identify anything about individual students from our results? So we were asked to make sure that if we had initially reported if there were at least one student in a performance level we allowed the data to flow publicly. Our federal level says we need to move that up to 3. So it really literally almost the day before we were to release the final spreadsheets, we got notification from the U.S. Department of Ed that we needed to raise that count up to 3. Now, what it means is on a public level, less data is out there to be transparent, particularly as we look at some group reporting, small cell size reporting. From a school-based level, you are getting fully everything. There is not suppression on what you're getting to use locally with school and district staff, but there is suppression when it comes to the public view of data. And usually there will be a little asterisk and then something that says suppressed data on the, and there will be some blank cells on the school report card. So Jennifer's theory is that in our last federal audit that was done virtually, they had more time to look at everything than we've had in prior federal audits, because we were using the same process as we've used for many, many years. But we had a couple of things that we were told that must be changed, and the reporting of the data and applying suppression was one of those. I'll pause there, Jennifer, to see if you have anything you want to add on that.
I think that you did well there, Rhonda. In addition, the school report card has been updated to reflect the new suppression rules, and the additional data, again, as Rhonda mentioned, is supplied to the schools and districts. So the schools and districts have the individual student data, all of the aggregate data. It's just what can be displayed publicly is the issue of suppression. So we've taken the steps to adhere to the suppression rules that the department gave us, and taken that step with our vendor, the school report card vendor, to update that. So it has, the school report card now reflects publicly the updated suppression rules.
Absolutely.
So let's go on to the plans for the 21-22 school year. As Rhonda mentioned, the schools and districts took extraordinary efforts to provide the opportunities to our students that were in person during the 2021 school year. Last year, as she mentioned, we had a good number of students that were able to participate in state testing. All of our assessments are developed to be administered in person. So we do not have any type of remote administration across our program. So the students who were tested were in person, whether they were in person at the school. The students who were in a hybrid situation that were receiving instruction both in person and a virtual option. That hybrid, we expected the students to be tested on the days that they were in school. And the students who were completely virtual, we asked that those students have the opportunity to take the state assessments. And many of them did take that opportunity to get the state assessment and then receive the results. And so again, the schools and districts went above and beyond last spring. And we're very proud of our school and districts for the efforts they made throughout the pandemic and continue to make on a regular basis, because we know quarantine sickness is not over, and we're making plans for this year, the 21-22 school year. At this point, we do not have any flexibilities from the U.S. Department of Education. Rhonda and I got to be in some meetings with representatives from the Department of Education about a month ago, and at that point there were no flexibilities nor any hints or rumors of flexibility. So we are in contact with other states, and they are not hearing of any flexibilities at this point. So without any federal flexibilities, we are preparing for a full administration of our state assessments this coming spring. So those plans include assessments across all of the subject areas that are both federally and state required. Actually, testing has happened already this fall. Our kindergartners that are entering into the 21-22 school year as kindergartners were screened, and that is complete now. And we are very proud of our kindergarten administrators, and so that was a very good participation in that screening process. The other content areas that we are moving toward assessing this year include reading and math across grades 3 through 8 and at the high school level at grade 10. We will also have science. That science assessment is administered in grades 4, 7, and 11. Social studies, we did, as we mentioned, have a good administration this past year. We ask, because the social studies standards were adopted previously, those standards were new this past year, and those new standards were being implemented in the classroom. As Misty mentioned previously, in the high quality instructional resources section, she mentioned that there were multiple standards that were adopted and were being implemented. So those new standards had teachers that came in and developed items based on those standards. And those new items needed to be field tested. So this last year, during the 2021 school year, those new items were field tested. And that was not required, but we invited all of our districts to participate. There were 100, I want to say 130, 131, somewhere in the 130 number of districts who did take us up on that invitation to field test those social studies items. So we're really appreciative of those districts who participated last year, because that prepares us for the state assessment in 21-22 for those social studies standards to have an operational test. So those new items were field tested last year and will become operational in the spring of 21, or in the spring of 22. As you see here on the slide, those social studies assessments are giving at 5, 8, and 11. Also, on-demand writing, editing mechanics will be administered at all grade band levels. And the college admission exams, which is the ACT, it is in statute that the ACT, actually the college admissions exam, is administered at grades 10 and 11. You'll notice that if you look at the statute. We administer it at grade 11 because of lack of funding for that mandate of grade 10. KDE does not have the funds and the resources available to expand that contract. KDE continues to advocate for additional fundings for the ACT at grade 10, but until we get additional funds, the ACT can only be administered one time, and that would be at grade 11, which we've administered since 2008. Other assessments, we have the end of course for early graduates. Now that's a program that not all students and not all districts participate in. The early graduate program is a contract between the student, their parents, and the school system to allow the student to graduate in less than 3 years. So there are a number of requirements that the early graduates have to meet, and an end of course assessment, meeting those benchmarks in the end of course assessment, is one of the requirements that the early graduates have to meet. So we offer through our office those end of course assessments. That's in the 4 content areas, English, math, science, and social studies, to the students that are in that program. And then, of course, we also have Access. And Access is our English language proficiency exam for our English learners. So students who are identified as English learners, they have the Access test, and the students who need an alternate alternate English language proficiency exam, we offer that at all grade levels. And of course, the alternate assessment is offered at all grade levels and across all content areas in each of the grade levels that are displayed here. Now, our alternate assessment, the window opened yesterday. So our students in our alternate assessment, they have 2 windows. The standards and items within the standards are broken up into 2 different testing sessions to reduce the amount of testing on our students in that population, so that they're take a reduced amount during each window. So it's spread out across the year. So our alternate assessment, the students in that program are beginning that assessment as of yesterday. There is a quality of school climate and safety survey that is state mandated, that is made up of questions about the students' perception of their school. So there are a number of items that relate to the safety, security of our students, the climate of our schools, such as do they feel safe? Do they feel like they've had that there's someone that they can talk to at the school, and trying to get a sense of how the student feels about the environment that they are in at the school. Also, this year in 22, there will be additional items added to that survey called Opportunity to Learn items. These were first introduced last year during the pandemic, and those items just try to get a sense of the opportunities the students were getting during the pandemic. Some of those items included, did they have opportunities to connect with their teachers when they were on a virtual instruction, or when they were out, did they feel like that they learned and they were competent in their learning? So things of that nature. Now, those opportunities to learn, again, will be included in the assessment for the 22 spring assessment. And they are administered to all the students that are at the tested levels. So grades 3 through 8 and 10 and 11 at the high school. New this year in 2022, the naming of our state assessment will transition to the Kentucky Summative Assessment. Now actually we started that in 2021. The Kentucky Summative Assessment replaces K-Prep. So it's the terminology difference, because the new standards will be assessed. So as we've transitioned each of our operational assessments to the new standards, we've transitioned the name. So this past year, we were able to assess new standards as well as old standards. And that naming convention is now Kentucky Summative Assessment, and our alternate is the alternate Kentucky Summative Assessment. So we have already transitioned to that name. And there are other assessment related projects going on, including we had a text-to-speech pilot for our Kentucky Summative Assessment, and we're also looking at other assessment types as well. In Kentucky, we're doing a small-scale pilot, and we look forward to the results of those pilots. Now, for the 21-22 Kentucky Summative Assessment, our current plans are to make a few changes. Last year, during the pandemic in 21, we administered in Kentucky a shortened version of the assessment. It was around 60 minutes, a very limited number of items that each student took. As you can imagine, that was quite popular in the administration of that shortened assessment. Now, with the shortened assessment, we were able last year to provide only performance levels and no further subdomain reporting for the students. So at that high level for performance level of novice, apprentice, proficient, and distinguished for our students. Moving into this coming year, we are going to continue a shortened assessment, not as short as it was in 21, but shorter than what we had previously. So we're trying to really get that balance between an assessment that was 60 minutes and those that we had previously for around 2 hours. So we're really trying to design assessments that will meet all the technical specifications of a large-scale assessment that would pass peer review, but yet make it short enough that it doesn't impact instructional time as much as we have previously. So we're really trying to develop these shorter assessments. With those shorter assessments, it does impact the design and the reporting. Because of the shortened assessment, we're developing what's called a matrix assessment. And a matrix assessment means that the students in the school will take different forms of the assessment. So, for example, if we had a classroom, if you all were my classroom, then Jana Beth would take one form and Heather would take a separate form, and Renee would take another form, and those forms would have common items between them, but they would also have different items. So the matrix form, the matrix design, there's multiple forms that cover the content that the school would get the coverage of all the standards, but an individual student may not receive all the standards. So that the assessment is shorter, the forms are shorter, but the coverage of the standards is there within the school. That does impact reporting because there are reduced a number of items per student. Then the students would not receive all of the additional reporting at the subdomain level. So students will receive performance levels of novice, apprentice, proficient, distinguished for that content, but not the subdomain levels within the different standards. Now, the school, though, could receive additional information that could impact and inform teaching and learning with the additional pieces. So you see here in the last bullet, the schools would receive not only the performance levels for the content area, and the example I used here is reading. Then they would also receive in reading those subdomain levels reporting of key ideas, details, integration of ideas, and so forth like that. The student then, however, would not receive those additional subdomain levels. Continuing on with the plans for the 21-22 school year, as I mentioned, window 1 for the alternate Kentucky Summative Assessment began yesterday. It runs through December 20th, and their materials are already in the schools. And so far, so good. We haven't heard anything that is contrary to that, and so all is going well. The access testing for our English learners, again, that's our English language proficiency exam, is scheduled back to our traditional time frame of assessment during the January 6th through the February 18th of 2022. That's our traditional time frame that we administer the access testing. Then the end of course, there are a number of windows for those students in that early graduate program that begins later this month, so after Thanksgiving. And as you can see there are multiple windows. ACT, we last year in the 2021 school year, we offered 7 administrations of the ACT to meet the needs of the schools and districts and the students, particularly with those that had missed their opportunity to test in the spring of 2020. So we offered some fall 2021 assessments in the ACT, and then multiple opportunities for students to be assessed and receive their scores for applications to colleges and scholarships. The plans for this year is to revert back to the 3 administrations that we have of the ACT, or the 3 opportunities to test. There is some parent consent policies. Students, if they are under the age of 18, need some parent permission to opt into an educational opportunity service through ACT. ACT does share student information with post-secondary institutions and for their recruitment efforts. And so parents of students who are under 18 need to either give permission for that or not. So we're working through those policies, and we have test administration training coming up for the ACT. Actually begins tomorrow in Lexington and will be in Bowling Green on Thursday. With the success that we've had with the K-Prep and moving forward with the Kentucky Summit of Assessment being online, we've had a number of milestones with online testing. Last spring, we had over 1.5 million tests, I want to say, administered in the Kentucky Summit of Assessment online, and it was quite successful. Not that we didn't have any individual issues within the schools, but we were able to work through all of those and have a very successful online administration. So with that, we are moving very slowly to an online ACT assessment. We started talking about this with our student advisory committee. The commissioner has a student advisory committee, and they were very supportive of that transition. We also talked with the previous members on this council, the School Curriculum Assessment Accountability System, and we also in the Office of Assessment Accountability have District Assessment Coordinator Advisory Group, and we've talked with multiple people and groups on the transitioning to online assessments with the ACT and have been very supported in those efforts. So we started with our students because if they didn't feel like that they had the experience and the expertise to go toward online with the ACT, we're not going to entertain that. But when they were quite supportive of that, we felt like that we should take that step. So this year will be the last year that our schools can choose to administer with the ACT being online. And I think our PowerPoint presentation just went away, Rhonda. I'll get it back here in just a second. So
Yeah,
we are.
I noticed that.
We are transitioning to online with our ACT. So this year they'll have schools will have the opportunity to administer in paper, and we will allow them to choose to do that. And then next year we will have administration of online for ACT. But then our students who need accommodations with paper assessment will always be able to have the opportunity to have their accommodations administered through a paper assessment. We have students, last year, through the Senate Bill 128 in the 2021 session, schools and districts had the opportunity to allow their students an additional year because of the pandemic, the opportunities for students to repeat their grades were offered to the schools and districts. Many schools decided to take that opportunity. Some did not. However, those who did, as far as testing, the administration of the assessments will be for the students who repeated that year will be at the level of which they are repeating. So if we had a student who was in fourth grade last year, decided to repeat the fourth grade this year, they will take the fourth grade assessment this year. So that's a long-standing policy that we've had for students who repeat grades for other reasons. So we use that consistency and that policy for the students who did take the opportunity to have that supplemental year. The only area that this is a little bit different in is students that are in 12th grade. Those students, if they were assigned a graduation code, we refer to that as a G code. So if the students that were in 12th grade in 2021 were administered a G code, they actually graduated, then they were included in the graduation rate last year. So that would have been their, whether they were 4 year or 5 years. So if they are repeating their 12th grade year this year, we see those students as graduates. So they are graduates in the system, and they would not be included in any type of indicators of accountability, such as state assessment results in reading and math or science social studies. They will be included in the graduation rate. If they were an on-time graduate, they would be included in the 5-year rate. So that's the only place that's a little different. Now, if they want to continue on taking other assessments like that would impact them individually, like for example, a career certificate, if they want to take those and use that for their own personal reasons, we would certainly encourage that at the local level. Yes. All right. Ron, I'll turn it back to you for the discussion about the significant medical exemption.
Sure. This is another issue with our audit. Kentucky for many years has allowed both a medical exemption for medical issues, both physical and mental health issues. And we had also allowed something called an extraordinary circumstance, because as you can imagine, if you think about every child in the state of Kentucky during the testing window timeframes, you have some very unusual circumstances that can happen. And some of those circumstances actually are connected to medical issues, but sometimes they're not. And we were very transparent. Again, we've done this for many years during many various audits that have occurred. And but the last time we were audited with the title programs, we were asked to remove the extraordinary circumstance exemption. that we could only exempt students from assessment and accountability. And again, this is about an accountability exemption as much as an assessment exemption, only for significant medical issues. So we have made the adjustments to the regulations, and those came through the prior committee that served on SCAAC. So all of those are now in place, but we are continuing to make sure that we communicate this level of detail, and then we'll need to share that communication back with the U.S. Department of Ed to sort of remove that finding from the state audit. So in the future, including this year, any type of those assessments we administer, particularly our summative assessment that Jennifer has reviewed with you, the only exemptions can be medical exemptions. They will not include any non-medical types of things that were part previously of that extraordinary circumstance category. And so our guidance has to be revised to reflect that, as well as our regulations. The regulations are completed, but we're continuing to put out more information about guidance. So that means there will occasionally be something that we might have handled through extraordinary circumstance, of a very odd and unusual circumstance, that if it does not connect to a medical type circumstance, will not be able to exempt a student. That means that their score, or maybe lack of score, they may not take the assessment, but their lack of score would end up in an accountability calculation at the school and district level. This is not something, obviously, that is our choice, that we are particularly pleased with, because we want to make sure that we do be as supportive of students as well as communities and schools and districts as we can be. But this is something we have been very directly told has to happen. So Janet Beth, I've noticed from chat, and Jennifer, because she was showing the PowerPoint, could not see this chat. So again, apologize, Martha, that there's been some problems going on with the viewing of the PowerPoint. Typically, if you can see the Jennifer, you should have been able to see her PowerPoint. So we'll do some research of why that was the case for you. But Janet Beth, I noticed that you said, so what I was going to say, these scores could result in zeros, and it'll be frustrating for real exceptions. And you're absolutely right, it could. Now, I think it will be a very small number that could be impacted, because there are things that have been considered extraordinary. We just put them under extraordinary because they're odd, that could have a medical connection. And those we could process as medical. The problem is there might be some things that don't have any medical issue. And if that's the case, now, and again, remember, medical can be defined as physical and mental health issues as well. But then if it's medical only, then we could begin to process it. So you're right, it could be frustrating for districts, and obviously frustrating for us a bit as well. Renee had a question about, did the federal government give any reasons for this change? Yes, in the federal law, it really emphasizes exemptions should be based on medical. And again, for years, we've been able to do our extraordinary circumstance and define that as a state. But they, and we were very, we were transparent in the process. It's in all our materials. We actually turned over, redacted data so they could see the number of students we were exempting in that category. And I'll emphasize to you, this is a tiny number of students. It's not like thousands of Kentucky students are receiving exemptions. It's a very small number that receives medical exemptions, and it was even a tinier number that received the extraordinary circumstance. But in the opinion of the federal level, we only can be in the space of the medical exemption, because their concern is that every student be included, both in assessment and in accountability. So it's part of that equity lens in their mind that they apply to the summative process. So that was the reason that was given for that. But just want you to be aware that this is a change that, and again, it's already gone through the regulation process, but you'll continue to hear us kind of push this in terms of conversation so that everyone is aware of it coming. So let me pause there and see if you have any questions before we move on here. And I appreciate the chat because we've been able to keep that up. And Jennifer, while you're presenting, I'll be sure to highlight any chat that's related to something
I
you
do
might
have
be
a
doing.
question. Chuck Fletcher has a question.
Yes, please. Uh-huh.
Okay. I'm just concerned. I don't see the slide. If we could go back a few slides, where each students, where the different classes were tested during the year.
Mm-hmm.
The one at the very bottom one, keep going. The very
Yeah.
bottom one, it talks about the survey.
Yes.
The safety, yeah, that's it. Quality of school climate and safety survey. I just had a concern, a question about how come that ninth graders, because it seems like coming into a high school during that particular time in their life, there's a lot of concerns for a ninth grader looking at the climate and the safety. And I thought maybe, I was wondering why that was not surveyed at that point.
I'll start and then I'll have Jennifer weigh in as well. The initial plan for the survey came from some conversations that were had with some developers of the original statutory language. That there wanted to be an emphasis on school quality and safety. And we looked at a lot of different ways to potentially collect data and use data. But one of the issues was the initial collection was done through where kids are actually assessed, because there is then an assessment score for each child. And then there is this survey of information from each child. So the reason ninth grade was not included is there's no testing at ninth grade, which also strikes people as a little unusual at some point. I think many years ago we had a little bit of testing, maybe at ninth grade with Explore potentially, or one of the ACT products that wasn't in assessment. So that's the reason ninth grade is out of that mix. 12th grade also has a similar conversation. 12th graders are included in graduation requirements. They're included in post-secondary readiness measures demonstrating they're ready for the next level. But there was discussion, should 12th graders be included on survey? Most people were concerned that 12th graders tend to get that sort of 12th grade, I'm out of here mindset by that time. We all maybe remember back to those days. So there's always been concern with including 12th grade assessments or information and accountability beyond what we, obviously have in our post-secondary collection of credentials for students. So that's the reason it's in that position right now. That has been an ongoing bit of conversation. Should ninth graders be mixed in the system in some way? And Jennifer, I'll pause there to see if you have anything you want to weigh in on, and then obviously we have others here on the committee that maybe were in part of those conversations. They may want to weigh in as well. But great question and appreciate it, Jennifer.
Sure. Just an application of the Quality of School Climate and Safety Survey, we developed that within the online platform as it's like a test, so that it's taken on in the TestNav platform that is used to administer the Kentucky Summative Assessment. So with the fact that those students were in the system, those students were taking the content area assessments, the work is done within that online system and attached to those students. So that, I think that was the application of that survey was connected to those students who were already taking the assessments. So that was where the conversation lied.
All right.
Okay. Any other I think that, so any other comments, Rhonda, about the significant?
No, I think that's what I had to share. And then obviously, we want to continue to do what's best for students as absolutely as much as we can push that envelope to do. But we will need to have a medical connection, be it mental or mental health or physical health. So, Jennifer, I think you're going to talk about resources.
I am. We've developed a couple of resources. One is an accountability at a glance, and the other one is an assessment, accountability, and reporting through the 2024 school year. So the accountability at a glance is linked here, and we will share this presentation with you so that you have the resources. It's a document that shows the assessment system, the accountability system in a detailed way. We tried to make it as comprehensive as possible, and it ended up being around 3 or 4 pages. Now, the changes to the accountability system that are about to be implemented were brought about by Senate Bill 158 in the 2020 legislative session. So there are multiple changes to the accountability system, and all of those are legislative changes. There are a number of areas that are different than the previous accountability system. The changes the legislators made align to the accountability system in California. So they really designed the legislation around the accountability system and based it on what California was doing. So we looked to California for those areas in which they were moving forward with. So the statute again was passed in the 2020 General Assembly, and we've been working through the past year or so through getting those regulations that align to those changes passed. That the regulations are become effective this month, actually at the end of the month. So we'll have all of those things in place around that accountability system. And this accountability at a glance really puts together those different pieces that will be used to annually meaningfully differentiate schools and districts. The other accountability resource that we have is about assessment, accountability, and reporting through 2024. We've got the plans for developing assessments, reporting assessments, and the accountability system through 2024. And this one-page document just outlines those plans. It's organized into a table format that's really easy to interpret, and it's clear in its presentation. Now, we will note for you that these are the plans that we have at this point. And at the current stage at which we're in is the standards are on a rotating basis that they need to be reviewed. Or each of the content standards need to be reviewed and revised. And the current standards that are being reviewed are the science standards. And those need to be moved through the process to meet this timeline. And if they don't, then this timeline will be revised. So these are the plans that we have at this point for testing, reporting, and then the accountability of those different content area standards. You can see here, I've given you some snapshots about assessments through the 2024. So you can see here the through assessments, you can see the kindergarten screen, the pilot that we had this year, the study that we had on the text-to-speech, and as I mentioned earlier, the alternate Kentucky summative assessment and end of course. And in the spring, of course, we'll have all of the content area assessments that I mentioned earlier. In 2024, you noticed that very similar testing pattern, and you'll see in the middle, the second bullet in the spring of 2023, that those revised science standards are planned to be field tested. And again, if those standards are not adopted, then that timeline may shift a little bit. And then we may have to shift that field test forward into maybe 2024. So that's assessment snapshot. The accountability snapshot is that we'll have the accountability this year for the 21-22 school year. The accountability system has components of what we call status and change. It's again similar to the California model, where status is what we've always had in Kentucky, which is the current year performance of our students, and that's what we'll continue to have this 21-22 school year. The change component will be the change on each of the indicators from the prior year to the current year. So moving forward into the 2022-2023 school year and beyond, the accountability system will have both status and change as components of the accountability system. And you can see here on the slide that there are multiple indicators within the accountability system. The state assessment results in reading and math, state assessment results in science, social studies, writing, and which includes on-demand and editing mechanics, as well as progress on English language proficiency, quality of school climate safety survey indicator, post-secondary reporting through 2024 will be based on the performance of those different pieces. So in the fall of 22, we'll have the those indicators based on status, and then moving into 23 and beyond, it'll include both status and change within the reporting. So that, again, that accountability at a glance just is there for you. Another change that we highlighted in that at a glance document is the minimum in count that is changing from the previous accountability system, whereas we used to have a minimum in of 10 per grade per content. And it's shifting now to a minimum of 30 students per level. So our accountability system is a level-based system, which is elementary, middle, and high, not a school-based system where, if, for example, if you had a K-8 school, for a K-8 school, they would have both an elementary and a middle school level reporting. So for the minimum in count, there would be a minimum of 30 students per level, elementary, middle, and high. And again, Rhonda talked earlier about the suppression that we've had to follow. So we will have to continue to follow those suppression guidelines from the Department of Education and those FERPA guidelines. Okay. Let me pause here, and Rhonda, I think that we've heard a little bit about the Kentucky Coalition, but do you want to just connect it for us?
Sure. I'll just connect this back. So again, we kind of started with, there's some exciting work in the little bit more distant future. What's happening with our L3s, what's happening with the coalition. Can we rethink how we assess and how we hold schools and districts accountable? And a lot of that conversation starts with a local accountability, but eventually we do have to meet sort of federal acceptance on accountability because much of what we do is legally based, either in federal law or in state law. So as part of this work evolves, there will either need to be some flexibilities that are permitted within that federal state landscape, or we'll need to see if there can be some rewriting, particularly at state law. Now, federal law, there will be a potential renewal of the federal law that is Every Student Succeeds Act. I think beginning next year, it flags for possible renewal. Now, again, that means Congress has to reach agreement, but I know they're interested in the kinds of things that Kentucky is experiencing with the coalition work and the L3s, and we have national partners that are also beginning to push that conversation forward federally. So know that in the Office of Assessment Accountability, we're supportive of innovation and new work moving forward. There will be, again, obviously, processes that will have to happen for implementation, and that will not happen, obviously, in this year when work is moving forward, just to sort of try out some protocols. So I think, Jennifer, if you'll click through just so we can see I think we've lifted actually some of these slides from Karen Dodd's presentation you saw earlier. So, she reminds you of purpose. We've already looked at that. As well as the listing. This is a nice little summary of the various things that have led so far into the work and informed the work on slide 22. And then as we move to slide 23, it will give you another little piece of information around the summary. So again, around the coalition, the state coalition is not meeting as actively right now. The work is at the local coalition level, but the state coalition will come back and kind of hear how it's going at the local level. And then obviously we'll need to try to inform policy makers and decision makers and those who write our state and federal laws. So it's exciting work ahead. It'll be a bit of a path to get there in the end in terms of time. If you kind of think about this, is not like turning around a skidoo. If you're a boating person, this is a little bit bigger boat that's getting turned. And so assessment accountability systems are quite complicated, meet a lot of, and have prescribed in law a lot of requirements, both for the assessment side as well as the accountability side. And as Jennifer outlined, those state requirements are more prescriptive in Senate Bill 158 than what we've experienced in prior systems over the years. And Janet Beth highlighted some of those systems that we've had. So we've had a lot of different experiences since the early 90s, many of which we can learn from, and we've always kind of been out there doing some innovation along the way. So we're excited to just see sort of where this work and how it evolves. And you all will be very informed of that along the way, as well as seeking your opinions on it. I know as we have upcoming discussions with you. So Janet Beth, I'll pause there and we'll see if anyone has any other specific comments or questions related on just what's coming up this year for requirements for schools.
I don't see any questions in the chat, but we'll give everybody a minute to see if they want to add anything. So Rhonda, as we close out, I do think it would be good. You mentioned, so right now the accountability system is a shell of what it needs to be. Can you explain who is working on some of the details for how the scores will come together and that type of thing?
Oh, sure. Well, we are obviously internally working on calculations and modeling data. We have psychometric support because a lot of this is psychometric. So the Center for Assessment, which is a nationally renowned assessment accountability support service, they do policy work. They're not trying to sell you any kind of product or push you in any direction. We have staff from the center that are working with us on developing out the calculations. Some of it is quite prescribed in federal law and in state law. And then we also have we have a person who serves as our lead psychometrician, that is Bill Audie with Education Measure. And we have HUMRO involved, another entity of psychometricians, and then our own data staff. So we're beginning to do some modeling. We've done some early modeling, but we're beginning to get those calculations firmly together. And again, much of it is prescribed actually in the accountability regulation. It's just now a matter of bringing it together. And there will need to be standard setting work, not only in the testing with what is a student, what does student need to do to be novice, apprentice, proficient, distinguished, but we will have to have standard setting work to help set schools to develop those categories of color. whether a school is a bright royal blue or whether they're red and need some support. Part of that standard setting process will bring together Kentuckians to help set the standards. But in addition to that, we will have our local superintendents group, which is the local superintendent advisory council, LSAC, that's government appointed, just like you are governor appointed. They will also have some approval over those filing code indicating to schools what their color level is. So it's a little bit work down the road to get this new system in place, and then obviously thinking forward of how the measures might change, even moving down the road a few years.
Thank you, Rhonda. And so you can kind of see the work that we will be viewing and giving input on. And so if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I want to remind everybody on the committee that Joy Barr is our contact at Kentucky Department of Education, and she can get you in touch with anybody or provide you with any resource that we saw or you want to learn more about today. I also want to say that we had perfect attendance today, and I would encourage you to make sure March 15th is on your calendar, as well as July 19th. And so please put those next 2 meetings, but the bottom of the agenda does include the next 4 meetings. At this time, if someone would like to make a motion to adjourn, remember to state your name.
Chuck Fletcher, I move that we adjourn.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fletcher. And so we will just raise our virtual hands in the sky, and we will see this committee again in March. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Great to meet you and see familiar faces. Thank you all.